Hey everybody, thanks for joining me as we take a look at the storm update, snow update. I'm recording this Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. approximately, and not a ton has changed, but I want to talk through some things with you. I do have an updated forecast on snow totals, which has changed a little, not dramatically, but a little bit. Also want to talk a little bit about kind of what has changed with the storm that kind of has led us to the point we've been at. For those of you who happen to talk to me or see me or see one of my videos earlier in the week, quite a bit has changed from what we expected maybe midweek. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that happened, what the models have done, what's changed it. And actually, we can start to see some of what's happened. And this is going to get a little nerdy, but hey, it's a storm, so hopefully you enjoy the nerdiness. I promise I'll get to just the forecast part of it at some point. Here is what's going on right now. You can see here is our upper level energy in the southern jet stream, which is kicking off the whole event. And you can see a little bit of a swirl in the atmosphere to the north. These two are somewhat combining forces to create this storm, but most of the heavy lifting is being done by the southern stream storm. And you can just see this southerly motion across Mexico, and we're even tapping some Gulf moisture here already. That is just going to continue. We already have thunderstorms way out of front. Associated with like just some lift coming off the Gulf of Mexico and a clash of air masses. Very cold, quite warm, quite moist here. We'll look at temperatures to see how that happens. One of the things, maybe we'll come back to this and talk about some interesting, like why the models sometimes struggled a little bit with this storm early on. They've done much better, actually locked in about a day and a half ago, and really haven't changed much, some minor details, but basically have locked in as we got within about 48 hours, and really even by 84 hours, so 4 days before the storm even, we were pretty locked in, 3 to 4 days out. Okay, so here's what's going on. You can see we already have a big area of precipitation. Most of this is actually not really associated. This is like overrunning just warm air advection ahead of the storm. Obviously, we're cold across the northeast, and we're pushing warmer and moist air, and it's lifting up over that cold air. That's creating lift, and that is what all of this precipitation here is associated with. And this is eventually the low pressure that's way back to the west is going to start to kind of catch up with that, and it's going to create a surface low, a slightly stronger surface low that will eventually form off the East Coast as a kind of secondary low. The original low kind of dies as it heads up west of the Appalachian Mountains. Called this a Miller-type B storm yesterday. That's indeed what it is. Not an unusual. It's one of the two main ways we get coastal storms. There's a Miller A and a Miller B. This is a Miller B. Miller A is if it kind of comes along the Gulf Coast and doesn't redevelop, but basically kind of comes around. March 93 superstorm is like the prime example of that. So anyways, this is not that. This is a slightly different setup. You also have a clipper setup, but that's now we're getting really nerdy. Let's try not to do that too much. So anyway, you can see all of this overrunning precipitation, all of this, and especially some of this convection here. What happens when you have convection in the atmosphere is you're adding lots of heat to the atmosphere. And so even though it's very cold and we had a pretty good trough across a lot of the east, adding this heat is helping to build a ridge. And it particularly as this starts to run offshore a little bit, it's going to build a ridge across the Atlantic. And the reason the ridge is important is because you need a trough and then a ridge out east of us off over the Atlantic that helps the storm track move kind of up along the coast. And so all of this moisture out ahead, the models sometimes struggle with how much this will cause some ridging upstream, and that actually causes the trough to dig a little deeper to the west of it. Now, again, I promise this is very nerdy, so if you're not really following what I'm talking about, that's okay. But essentially, what you can see here is we have definitely driven cold air south. So if you're just like, why? Well, look at the change in air mass here, right? Already, first of all, Texas yesterday, we saw a lot of 60s, 70s even in Texas yesterday. It has cooled off dramatically. Even along the coast, we're down to the 40s, but we still have some warm, moist air, and certainly over the Gulf, it just doesn't ever cool off there. So, but not that far north, we have single numbers and teens and 20s, and in that clashing zone there, that is where we have all of this overrunning. This warm air is trying to be pushed by the swirl in the atmosphere, which is clockwise pushing this north across all of this cold air here. And you can see that there's kind of a line, and that kind of shows you where the storm is sort of in general headed. Now, when it bumps into the Appalachians, what's going to happen? It kind of rides to the west a little bit and dies, and then it transfers its energy over the top of the Appalachians out to sea and creates a storm out to sea, because again, there we also have a huge contrast because it's cold in interior parts of the Northeast, but it stays, it's going to stay about the water temperature, at least at the surface, and there's plenty of moisture here over the Atlantic. And while it's cold, certainly it's not good to go swimming in the North Atlantic right now. It's warm compared to what it is over the land. So that's part of what's going on here, big picture. If we take a look at how things changed with the models, this kind of starts us off Wednesday midday. It's the same time. This is a model run for like overnight tomorrow night, where the storm's going to be its strongest. You can see what happened in the upper levels is, especially early on, we had a much more progressive, faster moving kind of one portion of the system and like a kicker coming back, but it has slowed. The progression has slowed, given more time for this ridge. Watch how the ISO heights in this case go from kind of west to east to a little bit more of a southwest to northeast direction as the model trended back with the trough a little further, a little deeper to our west. And that has amplified the storm and allowed it to creep up the coast, which is why Wednesday, at least this model, this is the American model, it was predicting very mostly out to sea or just a coastal event and almost no snow for us here over southern New England. And now has us obviously in, one of the jackpot E zones. I still think the jackpot's probably a little south of us here, but certainly we're going to get plenty of snow. If we take, if we take a look at what that has done on the surface level, we'll kind of run this back. But as you see, we started off, and you'll notice a low pressure system way to the south. Then it kind of crept in, and then we've kind of locked in, but continue to creep. And sometimes the models progress. They'll make a jump, and then they'll jump back. And this all has to do with like what kind of data the models are getting. And all sorts of factors. But in general, that upper level reflection made the east has basically allowed this low pressure system at the surface to come closer and closer and closer to us. It's allowed more warm air, especially aloft, but even at the surface to move in. We're not believe me, as cold as we are today, we're not actually as cold as I would have anticipated us being today. And certainly tonight and into tomorrow, it's going to be a little bit warmer. Not warm. This is still going to be very cold for snow. It doesn't usually snow as hard as it's going to snow here with temperatures 10, 11, 12 degrees probably on average in southern Vermont when it starts snowing tomorrow. And then overnight when it's snowing, it's going to be about 10, maybe 8 to 10 degrees. That's quite cold for us to snow, but it's a little warmer than I was anticipating. Certainly it's a little warmer, and aloft it's warming up more than I anticipated. And so that's why if you talked to me midweek, I was pessimistic we were actually going to get anything out of the storm, but things have trended in this way, and sometimes you're wrong early on. That's why sometimes it's not good to forecast out 7, 8, 6, or that would have been like 5, 6 days out, or at least to know your limitations. Let's take a look at what this actually looks like starting 7 a.m. on Sunday, and watch as the precipitation starts to head in our direction. I still think you're basically good tomorrow morning through about noon, and then by noon we start to see some flurries. And by 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at least in Bennington and Windham counties, you got to start worrying about snow on the roads. And then basically it's going to be tough travel, particularly overnight on Monday. By Monday morning, things lighten up, although there certainly could be some leftovers with what's left of the kind of upper level, mid-level system that goes west of the Appalachians. It kind of leaves behind, and the surface low kind of continues to back up. We could have another period of light snow, but the bulk of our snow, probably 80 to 90% of our snow, happens between about 2, 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and probably by daybreak on Monday morning. Most of our snow will happen then. We could still, again, get an inch, 2, 3 on the back end of that during the day on Monday. It'll be enough to kind of keep it looking like it's snowing, but I would not anticipate the second portion of this to be heavy, and there might even be a break mid-morning on Monday before we get a little bit more. But again, this might just be an inch. This is probably a 1 to 2 to 3 inch kind of thing that happens after the fact. But you can see that's the progression we're talking about. It is going to snow heavy overnight tomorrow night. So let's take a quick look at my updated forecast map. I actually did not change where the lines are at all. We're basically looking for the jackpot areas, get a little bit of elevation enhancement, particularly in the southern, very southern greens. And some of this, obviously at elevation, you get a little bit more, but I think here, as you start to get further away from the storm, we're still talking about a kind of a maximum. But what has changed is basically these all got bumped up a little bit. It was 6 to 10 where it's 8 to 12 now. It was 8 to 12 where I'm now thinking 10 to 14, and 12 to 16 where I was thinking 10 to 14 before. These numbers are probably still a touch on the conservative side. So if they ended up anywhere, I would be surprised if you got less than the small number there. I wouldn't be completely shocked if you got more than the big number there. Pretty locked in, though. Basically, a lot of us are looking at a foot of snow. A lot of us even a little bit more than that. Certainly at the elevations could be more than that. I would not be surprised if someone in southern Vermont got 18 inches of snow. However, I think but however, I think this is kind of what we're generally looking for. There's obviously banding things in effect and stuff like that where bands can set up, and that can be hard to predict because you can sometimes get under a band that gives you 3 inches of snow an hour for 2 hours, and that boosts your numbers by 4 or 5 inches above what you'd expect. So, those things can definitely happen, do happen, basically impossible to predict ahead of time. Models sometimes hint at them, but there hasn't been a ton of hinting of a secondary band, but often they do set up the primary band. That really, really heavy snow, at least in terms of the most intense band, will be across more southern New England, although they also have to start to worry about a little bit of sleet influence as some more warmer air aloft is snuck in. So anyways, that's kind of what we're looking for. That's probably what most of you are interested in. In terms of the actual details, snow starts around noon tomorrow. I think you're good to drive until noon, maybe even till like 1, 2 o'clock before it starts to really kind of get slick on the around. But could see a few light flurries, especially down in the Bennington area by 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. But I think it doesn't start to accumulate till noon. Snow is heaviest overnight, but will continue through much of the day. Monday, the Monday snow is much lighter. Conditions will improve on the roads on Monday, although Monday will be a tough travel day. The morning will be hard. Overnight tomorrow night's basically, only an emergency. Do you need to go out? Because the roads, it's going to be snowing hard enough, and overnight we don't get quite as much plowing anyway, so it'll be, the roads are going to have a few inches of snow on them. So just be aware. Overnight snowfall rates 1 to 2 inches an hour, definitely possible, even higher in some spots if we get some particularly intense bands. We'll have to wait and see on that, but 1 to 2 inches an hour is likely overnight in a lot of places. Biggest storm of the winter so far, and a large storm. I maybe poo-pooed this a little bit too much the other day when I said this is like not that it's something that's like overly a big deal, but this is not the kind of storm that's out of the ordinary for us. It's the kind of storm we often see at least once a winter, sometimes more, not always. Sometimes we don't have any big storms during the winter, but this is nothing. This is not one I don't think that you're gonna for the Vermont impacts that will be remembered 10 years from now. Certainly for some of the impacts south of us, definitely, because it's a bigger deal in those places. And I'll lock it in now. I've already locked it in if you've talked to me at all over the last couple of days, but there is definitely going to be no school on Monday for everybody in southern Vermont. So yeah, just be aware there will be no school, and all the other kinds of things that sometimes get canceled will also be canceled on Monday. Traveling will be tough. Stay off the roads. Unless you absolutely have to be out there for something. And hopefully if you do have to absolutely be out there for something, it won't be as slippery as it could be sometimes. It's dry. It's going to be dry, cold snow. You get some decent traction on it. Visibility will be tough. That'll be the hardest thing on Monday and overnight tomorrow night. But anyways, it's a good day to stay home. Try to enjoy the snow. Skiing should be really good. There should be really good skiing snow on the backside of this. So hopefully you get a chance to get out there and enjoy that. It's going to stay cold, so the snow will stay great. Should allow a lot of skiing in the trees and things like that to happen. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel before, I'd encourage you to do so. Helps make sure you don't miss any of my videos. And I do want to give a quick shout out to my patrons. They help support what I do here at the West River Weather Guy. Sorry about that. They're a huge support to all of them, and we've had a few new ones. We always get a few new ones on Strom. So if you're interested, you get a Wednesday forecast. All of my patrons do that. I do just for them. There's a patron level at which you get a 10-day forecast on Wednesdays as well. There's also one if you just want me to email all the stuff if you don't want to have to search for my videos. I know a lot of you that's not a big deal, but some people it's annoying to try to find them. I will email you my videos if you sign up at that level as well. And yeah, just appreciate the support. And I will be back. At least I'm trying to do a little bit more with the Facebook feed. So look for some graphics and things like that on the Facebook feed, maybe some interaction tomorrow afternoon as we get into the storm itself. Although I'm certainly going to be rooting for the Patriots until the game's over. So you're probably not going to get a lot in the middle of the afternoon when the storm starts. But yeah, thanks for supporting the channel. And then usually I try to get a forecast out on Mondays for the work week. And then I try to get a forecast out Friday for the weekend for everybody else, and that forecast on Wednesday, of course, for the patrons. And then I try to get forecasts out when things are interesting. All right. Thanks for the support.